shocking incident in the Oval Office where J.D. Vance, the American vice president, ambushed President Zelensky, and then Donald Trump continued that attack on him. But then we had the reconciliation at the Pope's funeral in the Vatican, and that iconic photograph of Donald Trump and President Zelensky, heads bowed, head to head, sitting on chairs, talking to each other, which seemed to change Donald Trump's mind. But that needed to be reinforced, and this is where I think the visit by the European leaders, as well as the virtual meeting with the Coalition of the Willing, and then the phone call to Donald Trump, has pushed Trump into a corner where Putin's actions, he has just done nothing but embarrass Trump, and I don't think he knows where to turn.
And also Vladimir Putin has sent this low-level delegation to Istanbul to conduct negotiations with Ukrainians and European allies and also the American colleagues. Do you see this as a personal message to Donald Trump?
I think it's a misreading of the whole situation, because even if Donald Trump wasn't going to be there, and I know he said he might turn up, the delegation that they sent in did not match the US delegation that was there anyway, because we had Marcus Rubio, the Secretary of State, we had General Kellogg, the liaison to Ukraine, and we had Steve Witkoff, who had been into Moscow and sat down with Vladimir Putin at least 3 times. And that is a very, very senior US delegation sitting there observing what is going on. Then President Zelensky turns up and proves that he's there with his senior delegation waiting, and the Russians send a bunch of people who've got no authority to do anything. And I think they've miscalculated in a very serious way. I hope that we get clarification as to what Donald Trump is going to do next. But I think equally importantly, after the visit of Merz, Tusk, Starmer and Macron to Kyiv, that started all of this, we need them to step up now, and in particular the new German Chancellor Herz to in effect recognize that nothing that they had suggested Putin needs to do has happened, and therefore to make a very, very bold statement saying as to what level of support they're going to give Ukraine militarily as well as in further sanctions.
Don't you think that Donald Trump can turn against Vladimir Putin only after his meeting with Vladimir Putin, which could be failed? Only in that case, if this personal meeting is failed and no results would be achieved by both sides.
Yeah, I think Donald Trump will try that. I think he'll use that as a tactic, but I would expect him to put some subtle messaging out, subtly threatening Vladimir Putin that if he doesn't come to the peace negotiation table, then the Americans will take their gloves off and will back Ukraine and the rest of the international community in a much stronger way. We haven't heard that messaging yet, but then Donald Trump has had a very busy visit to the Middle East. He's just got back to the United States. He tends to spend his weekends playing golf. So whether he'll make a statement before he goes off to play golf or whether he'll wait until Monday, only Donald Trump knows.
And has Donald Trump called Vladimir Putin's bluff after these negotiations in Istanbul, from your perspective?
I don't think Donald Trump has at the moment. I think Donald Trump and his team are embarrassed, and therefore I think he will be waiting to sit down with the team and really work out with them what his next maneuver should be, because he recognizes that this is a very dangerous situation. If he comes down on the side of Ukraine and backs them completely, then he has made a very clear statement to Russia, and he's going to have to continue to do that for the rest of his presidency. Interestingly, I've just seen on social media before we started to record this, Donald Trump saying in the making a statement to say that the next 2 or 3 weeks, something to do with improving global security will come out. Whether that relates to Ukraine, or whether that relates to the Middle East, or whether that relates to China, or whether that relates to India, Pakistan, he didn't say. But it's interesting that he's still trying to get peace deals, which is a good thing. But I think he's doing a lot of that from his own personal perspective because he's still got his eyes on the Nobel Peace Prize.
And also, do you feel that Vladimir Putin would be able to tap Trump along for a long time, for the next weeks?
I think Putin will try and keep Trump on a one-to-one negotiating basis as long as he possibly can. We have to remember that no matter what we think of Putin and his tactics and all the rest of it, he and the Russians are masters at manipulation. And Donald Trump's team are very junior and therefore, I would suggest, very naive when it comes to being manipulated. We just have to look at Steve Witkoff's behavior in the Kremlin in Moscow when he visits Putin. The optics are not good, and it's showing a level of diplomatic naivety. And I don't think there's any real strength, including with Marco Rubio or others in Donald Trump's top team. Putin, Lavrov, Peskov, the whole of the Russian top team are masters at this, and I don't think Trump's team can see it. At some stage, Donald Trump will realize he is being played and get very embarrassed, and that can only be a good thing for Ukraine.
And how do you see his next options if he finally understands that he's been embarrassed by Vladimir Putin? Do we speak only about economic sanctions, or do you have any kind of hope that military debate will also come to the White House finally?
I do hope that when Donald Trump realizes that he's being played by Vladimir Putin and being deliberately embarrassed by him, that will see the military supplies increase dramatically for Ukraine. That would be Donald Trump sending a message. I think Donald Trump's got three things that he can do. The first is increase the military support to Ukraine and make it unambiguous that he's going to continue that support until Russia comes to the peace table. The second thing he can do is help European efforts and other international efforts to stop Russia's shadow fleet of oil tankers and other activities around the world. And the third thing that I think he can do is in the sanctions department, but not just increasing the sanctions against Russia, but increasing, but starting sanctions against companies and countries that are accepting Russian goods, Russian oil, Russian gas, like the Indian companies that are doing it, like Chinese companies, and companies that are supplying Russia with material that can be used for military purposes, like many of the Chinese companies are. So Donald Trump's got three things that could really, really hurt Russia, and let's hope he starts to play them.
Let's also cover Russia and Vladimir Putin. Do you feel that Putin would like to have a ceasefire deal until the end of this year? And what do the people around him think about this initiative?
I think Putin would like there to be a ceasefire on his, but purely on his terms. He needs time to rest. He needs time to rebuild his military. He needs time to get more people to the front line. He needs time to get more equipment to the front line and build up his ammunition stocks and supplies. And therefore, he'd want to do that. But he'd want to do that if he knew that Ukraine wasn't doing exactly the same. Because I don't think Putin wants an end to the war where the front lines are frozen at the moment. He still, I think, is under the impression that he can capture the whole of Ukraine and cause a fall of the Ukrainian government very naively. And what that says to me is that those that are advising him, his inner circle, are continuing to support him. They're continuing to feed him those lines. And I've spoken to a number of people over the last couple of weeks who know Putin an awful lot better than I do and know those that are closest to him. And they're firmly of the mind that Putin is the decision maker. No one else wants to speak out against Putin for fear of falling out of favor. And if you fall out of favor, you tend to fall out of a ninth floor window as well. and therefore they will continue to support Putin and everything that's going on. So there isn't that